Hey, what's up, party people? Oh my gosh, what is this extra fries going on over here, Jesse? Oh my
Woo!
goodness.
Burn out those
Wow.
conference calories,
What are you doing? Like, what the heck is going on over there? I'm like seeing all this jumping stuff. Like, what is going on, my friend?
I just had a crown put in about 2 hours ago, and so the Novocaine is still hitting here on the side of my face. And I read that if you get the blood flowing, it helps it go way quicker. So,
Well, you know what they say: every king needs their crown, right? So, welcome everybody to this week's edition of Team Tim and Jesse. We have to figure out something different. If there's anybody in the audience that might have some suggestions, Team Tim and Jesse, just kind of like, I don't know, how many questions did you get about that at MSP Live the other day?
It was several. That was probably the first question. So what's the deal? Are you on that? I'm like, yes.
Yeah, that's so funny.
That's figured that out yet.
Maybe
since you got the mic, why don't you do your quick intro? Give us a couple quick updates about MSP Live. How that and we're just gonna make you talk with a numb mouth all day.
I was thinking about getting some yes or no cards, but actually, I think the talking's working. So if I bite my cheek, I won't know it. Yeah, Jesse Miller, Power PSA Consulting. I help MSPs build, scale, and profit from security programs and with a vCISO first approach. So my talk actually at MSSP Live earlier this week was on how to build, package, and structure vCISO packages, and it went really well. I think that the audience came away with a ton of value, and I had a ton of people reach out to me and say that they're like, hey, I'm going to build a vCISO program because of this. And so that was my goal. And we did that. It was quite fun.
So Tim, what was it that you said on the green room about the conference? You were there with him, right? You said something about.
No, it was great. I mean, it was MSSP Alert Live in DC. Wasn't all MSSPs. It was kind of a cross section. The MSPs that wanted to become MSSPs, I think, were all in Jesse's great, panel. It wasn't a panel. He led it by himself, but just really covering, how to bring advanced security. And it's not surprising, right? I mean, Tim is, I'm going to call him Mr. FedRAMP, Mr. Federal everything, right? Dr. No.
Dr. No.
Dr. No. So obviously a pretty, a lot of IT and security providers for the federal government. CMMC was a big focus. Joy from Summit 7 gave a pretty good rundown. But yeah, no, it was great. It was a great quick conference and really good turnout. Robert Chiaffi, if anyone's ever if you've seen him talk, it's probably about how his firm and his personal wealth was almost crushed by what was it, the 2021 Kaseya Act. So, that really, it was perfect timing, as I think I laid out in a post a couple days ago, was he kind of talked about that. Everyone's fresh in their head, like, oh, why am I here? And what can I do to, learn? And, what is CompTIA doing to help people that actually do get breached? So it was very well positioned as kind of the first thing that kicked off on Monday night. So, but yeah, no, it was great seeing Jesse. Learned that he is the first of 7 children. He's from a big,
wow. I didn't even know. How did I not know that?
Midwest family. I got Jesse and I, tore up the town. So
nice, awesome. I was pretty bummed that I couldn't be there. As you all know, I drove to what was it, Philly during that pretty torrential downpour that went through New York City, and I was traumatized for life. I'm kidding. No, I actually was at a conference this week myself. Just literally got flown in this morning. I've been up since 2, so if I'm a little punchy, it's because I've been awake for a dozen hours. But yeah, I had an opportunity this week to get back on stage for the first time since, gosh, I think it might have been 2013, 2014. So yeah, it's been a hot minute since I've been back up on stage. And it was high school kids, college kids, business leaders. I mean, the mayor from Akron. So I was at Walsh University. The freaking mayor was there, and I was like, oh, like I was a little intimidated. But you know, the conference was good. It was one day. A good friend of mine, Paul from Pelican 3, you can find him on my LinkedIn. It was good to catch up with a couple of our MSP clients that work right there. So, you know, I wasn't as nervous as I thought I was going to be up there on stage. So, you know, if you're looking for speaking people, or, no, I'm just kidding. Make sure you bring Jesse, because I hear people are taking pictures of his slide like it's a Taylor Swift conference. So, anyways, without further ado, I'd like to introduce one of our good friends, very extremely mature MSP, Josh. Say hello, Josh, and you know, tell us a little bit about your background, a little bit about you, and yeah, you know, the floor is yours.
All right, sounds good. Well, appreciate you guys having me on. So my background, as far as a professional career, I have about going on 12 years of MSP experience, starting from just your level 1 help desk, all the way to sales engineer, solutions engineer, and now information security lead. And sprinkled in that too, I have 3 years of restaurant management experience, which sounds weird, but in the cybersecurity world, I've actually found that the restaurant management experience has helped quite a bit with dealing with some of the day-to-day things. So currently with CentrexIT, and yeah, we're super awesome MSP, one of the top MSPs in San Diego. So we're based out of Southern California. That's where most of our clients are, but we do have some clients that have kind of nationwide reach, and definitely looking to grow and expand and make everyone secure.
That's awesome. So restaurant, right? How does that play into cybersecurity? I'm really kind of interesting, like managing restaurants to compliance and risk and governance and cybersecurity and what, like, how does that, like, I don't get it. How does that all play in? Like, what experience from that? Like, we talk about this, you see this all the time, like, get into cybersecurity by doing this, this, and this, like, and you know, and most of the LinkedIn posts are clickbait, but you've actually done it, right? You were this, you know, this manager at a restaurant, and now you're in this IT stuff. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I went from MSP restaurant and now back to the MSP, so it was in between there, but really linking it to how it works with cybersecurity. And this is perfect because I actually in another cybersecurity community I'm a part of, the Black Hills InfoSec, if you guys aren't aware of that one. It's a fantastic community. Yeah. But there's somebody in there who works, he's a student, but he also works for the college and trying to build up their cybersecurity programs. And he asked if people would be able to do a Q&A session for students. And of course, I'm always available to help out and love doing that stuff. And it was really interesting because these students are like, well, if we're not getting these internships and things like that, how do we get these experiences to go into cybersecurity? And I was like, go get a restaurant job. So, realistically, like, first and foremost, if you're working incident response, it's a stressful scenario. So if you're working in restaurants, it's super stressful. You have to learn how to prioritize things, how to work under pressure, how to stay calm, how to work long hours. It's a different kind of stress, but it's still the same thing. You have to learn how to prioritize what things to work on, not lose your cool. An incident response can be very stressful, and having to communicate with businesses like, hey, you might have just lost all your stuff. You might have lost all of your documents and things like that. I would say restaurants a little more stressful when you're dealing face-to-face with customers who are upset. Thankfully, I didn't have to do this one, but my good friend who's the regional manager of this restaurant said that one time he had a dad whose daughter ordered a burger and a grill scraping blade somehow fell off into the burger, and he had to explain to the dad why it's in there, how it got in there, and basically deal with that. And I feel that would be way more stressful than any incident response scenario. And I've definitely had my fair share of angry customers and having to deal with that, or staff and things like that. So you give me an incident response, it's like, dude, I've been there, done that. Like, this is easy compared to the fires and things that I've had to put out in real life. And then, you're a compliance person. And so in thinking about it, when I reached the general manager level, if I wasn't at work, I was on my phone working, like people calling me all the time. How do I do this? This happened. This went wrong. What do we do? So I realized that if I want a day off without my phone, I had to start making policies, procedures. So it's, hey, if the POS goes down, here's a step-by-step guide on what you have to do. If the kitchen management system goes down, here again, these steps. And even taking it further than that, like if you're closing the restaurant, here's what you do, clear things off in this order. So what does that sound like from a cybersecurity or even just an IT perspective? You're building work instructions, you're building KBs, you're documenting things, you have a disaster recovery policy. If your POS going down as a disaster, here's how you recover from it. It's kind of like a business continuity plan. So it's two different things, but really it's the same thing. So you kind of get that experience.
So a lot of the skills that you learned by working in the restaurant gave you that like what we like to talk about, that shift left mentality, right? That be prepared mentality, right? Because you never know when the kitchen fire is going to happen, especially if I'm in the kitchen, right? So I really love that journey. Jesse or Tim, you have any comments on that so far?
Tim, by the way, Jesse and I have both worked in restaurants. Are you the odd man out, Tim?
No. So yes, I worked in a little podunk restaurant here, and I went like washing dishes, bussing tables, but I was no manager of a restaurant. I just was too busy eating all the food, so I got kicked out.
It's Friday, 6:30. You're on the tail end of a double. One waiter called off, and you just got triple sat. What do you do?
Prioritize, man.
Right. Well, I always said that
at a time, and
that's right. And someone would tell me, "Oh yeah, I used to wait tables or I used to bartend." I'm like, "That's a plus because I know you have some priority and some crisis."
I mean, so in full transparency, I did bartend for a while, and I did have some of that experience, but wasn't for me. It wasn't.
Well, the other thing too is it does give you some really strong soft skills. If you're a bartender or a waiter, you have to know how to talk to people, how to relate to people, because the better you are at that, the more tips you make.
That's right.
And again, that relates to your cybersecurity, your transparency. One thing that I'm definitely passionate about is we got to break that stereotype of being that IT guy that hides in the server room. Is unapproachable, like the character from IT Crowd who is like lights turned off in the server room. You have to be able to communicate with clients, with other departments, and work with them, partner with them, and things like that. So having those soft skills, being able to relate to people, and especially if you're an MSP, it doesn't matter if you're help desk tech any level, like you're in a sales position. Everything you do, you're constantly doing sales, marketing, in addition to your job. And again, having those soft skills that you learn from restaurant work is invaluable at that.
Yeah. He started his talk the other day, like, this is difficult for me. I'm an introvert, right? So I agree. Talking, like, reading people, and as Josh said, like, if you want to do well and get a lot, think they had a great experience, like they're going to tip you well if you can kind of read them and like predict things and ask things. Like, you're scanning your tables, you're like, oh, I forgot that. Like,
right.
Reading their eyes, like the death eye, right?
Yeah.
So being either working in the restaurant industry is kind of like being in cybersecurity. Like, you have your tools to help you watch, you have your policies and procedures, your closing procedures, right? So I can definitely see the relatability there around, and it might not just be restaurants, right? Like any sort of customer service facing type role, managerial, where you're like having to like play the puppet master, right? But also being personable and relatable and being able to effectively communicate. So, we talk a lot about, and you see a lot of the stuff on LinkedIn, like how to get into cyber, or, HR departments putting these exuberant requirements on jobs. Like, we won't get into that, but I think Josh's story is great. Like being able to come from that customer service world and being able to make that applicable in the cyber world. I think that's really cool. You know, that's a really great story. You should hang on to that and tell that story more. So, but let's get into what is a cybersecurity maturity model. Now I'm feeling like it's CMMC all over again, but it's not. But it is. But it's not. So, Josh, I know you guys are doing some unique stuff over there. Maybe take a minute and kind of give us a high level overview of like how CentrexIT as an MSP is using a maturity model with their clients.
Yeah, so super high level. It's based off of the CIS controls, which we all know here. There's 18 categories, and there's like what 160 some controls, right? So if I go to you and say, "Hey, we got to secure like your IT, your business should follow CIS. Here's 160 things we need to do." Not going to work, right? We need to simplify it and talk in terms that everyone can understand. So what we've done is we've applied that to a 5-step model. Level 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and then at each level there's building blocks. For example, level 1 is going to be more of your cybersecurity insurance requirements, the start of regulatory requirements, just your low impact, low risk things that everyone should have. MFA 321 backup, for example, right? So level 1, we get 321 backups. So now you have offsite backups. So let's jump ahead to level 3. You have backups now. Let's test them. So level 3 is building a backup and restore process. It's kind of like what I always say in my presentations is it's like always car analogies, right? Everyone drives cars, things like that. It'd be nice when you're starting off, you want the fancy high-tech car, the high-powered sports car, same thing with you're going IT or cybersecurity. Everyone wants the SIEM, like the super cool, prevent the Russian hackers and things like that. But yeah, you can sure go out and buy one. It's not going to work very well because you don't have the people and the process behind that. Same thing if you go out and buy a fancy sports car as your first car. Cool, it's super shiny, but like, how do you drive? Do you even have your driver's license yet? Do you have the process established with how to be able to handle that car? So it really is, let's building blocks. Let's get you to level 1. Okay, cool. Let's get you to level 2 and kind of how it works. And it's among the 3 domains, the people, process, and the technology. And a lot of times, especially with other MSPs and things like that, not to call anyone out, but it is true that most of the focus is on technology. And I'm sure you guys would agree with that. Whereas the people and process side of things kind of falls to the wayside, but it's all equally important. And that's all part of our maturity model.
It's because we all want
Yeah, go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, Tim.
So, and maybe I'm jumping the gun here, but as you said, tools, I think most MSPs, tools are easy, right? They have the tools, they resell them, they upcharge for them, and it kind of like it's always the same thing. The tool doesn't get any better like month to month, but like what you're talking about is like 160 controls. And I used to work at a GRC vendor, right? And how we taught MSPs to sell CIS controls, right? It's like you're not going to get to 160 overnight, and it's like how do you? I guess, and I'm just curious, Josh, like how you guys bill when you're starting from zero, right? Like even if you get to level 3 or level 5, like, do you guys bill like time and materials? Like, do you do compliance as a service and like you roll out a control a week or 2 or 3 or like I guess what's your cadence and like how do you? I think this is like personally, I think it's where MSPs struggle, like how to monetize getting through like the CIS framework. So does that make sense?
Yep. No, it definitely makes sense. So the answer is kind of, it depends. So the other thing with our model as well is it's not, some of them aren't specifically tied to a control. It's more tied to solutions. And especially things that are already in our catalog and what we're offering. For example, your RMM tool gives you basic asset management. So that checks off a couple of the controls. So again, it's not necessarily like downloading the CIS benchmarks for Windows where you're making all those GPO policies. It's more an overarching like, to meet certain controls like, hey, let's get you like DNS filtering is one. So we have DNS filtering solution. If you're on there, it covers some of the controls based on that. So each of the controls in our maturity model, there's about 8 to 9 of them per per level. They're all tied to an offering or, stuff that we do as well. So if you're a managed service customer, just based off of our base MRR stack, you might meet some things in level 1, level 2, level 3 off the bat. And then as we go, there's additional things like the compliance risk. So, hey, you need policies, you need a DRP policy, you need BCP, things like that. That's where compliance scorecard can come in hand. So, and then some of those solutions, again, there's monthly costs, there's time and material, things like that. And again, each client is going to be at a different level as well. So, if some of them might have these things. Hey, you manage your SIEM or something like that. That's something you've chosen to take on. So we can check it off on the maturity model. Let's focus on what other aspects we can get you.
Yeah,
Jesse, I see you over there waiting to chime in, even though your mouth is numb, but have at it, my friend.
You got me too excited. No, I think that's really smart what you guys are doing. It's very similar to how I counsel MSPs to do it. And exactly right. You can't just take and say, here's 160 controls, you're doing 50 of them, you need to do 110. Like, there's no priority, you just need to do this. So I think what you've done is really smart. You've taken and not only compartmentalized those, built them into manageable chunks for the client, made it easy to digest, but then you've also done what is, I think a lot of folks miss, is taking and making sure that you have canned matrices that layer your products in to meet those controls. As you said, asset management for the RMM, that might make it a partial, but you're not doing passive scanning, right? So when you get to level 3, you're doing some IDS or some vulnerability management, and then that makes it a full yes. So you can then kind of move them through in that stoplight fashion from green to yellow to red, and it gamifies it for the customer. It makes it easy to understand. It helps them budget. And most of all, it builds you MRR and funnel into the process over the course of the customer lifecycle. So I love all of that. And just one thing to add to this is that, again, showing that, addressing that, don't you do this for us already type of thing. And I think that's becoming less of an issue, but there's still clients out there that are refusing to get on board for cyber services. So exactly when you're delivering a risk assessment, you can say, hey, without our MSP services, you'd be at a 95% risk. But because you have our MSP services, you're at a 75% risk. So we're actually eliminating 25% or 20% of cyber risk with our core IT services. Now, 75% is not great, and that's the part we need to address. But now you've clearly demarcated what you are doing for them, what you aren't doing for them, and where they need to go. And so I think all of that you just talked about is really good to hear, and I'm glad you guys are taking that initiative with your clients. I think it's spot on, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, exactly right. Like the scorecard thing, the red, yellow, green thing, the thermometer thing, the scorecard thing, like it resonates with the clients, right? They can relate to that, right? Like being able to like move them through a process, right? So, as MSPs, we've said this before, you start doing break fix, you realize you can charge some money. Now you're doing monthly reoccurring, but you're not really doing a lot. And, Nigel Moore's book talks a lot about packaging and profit, right? So if you haven't seen Nigel's book, go over to Amazon and grab it. But it's all around building your packages, right, for your MSP. And I love what you're doing, Josh, because it kind of gives them a little bit of a baseline, a little bit of a test, a litmus test, putting in some of the foundational pieces that they need, like especially with cyber insurance. Are you doing backup? Are you doing training? Are you doing these things that cyber liability is pretty much demanding at this point, right? And then growing and iterating. Now, I don't know, Josh, if you do this, and you don't have to share your secret sauce, but when we would do our QBRs and we would move them from a level 1 to a level 2 to a level 7 to a level 40 or whatever, through that process, we would renegotiate and extend the contract for a year. So it was never really a 1-year contract. It was always 1 year plus 3 months, 1 year plus 3 months, 1 year plus. So when you first sign that client for the 1 year, it's really 3 or 4 years, because as you're moving them through, you're shifting the date, right? And so that's why these QBRs are so important, and that's why having multiple packages and iterating and moving them through for you as an MSP, 12 months, you don't have to worry about it, because now it's actually 15 months, 18 months, 22 months, right? So it's just something that we've always done when we've, do our QBRs, renegotiate, set new services, and push the date 3 more months.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear too. I'm going to keep going back to this waiting tables analogy, but Josh, how are you? Because I think that customer service actually influences a lot of this way that you're thinking about it. So how are you getting your table touches, so to speak, with your clients as they once they're on board and you're delivering services for them?
Yep. So we do QBRs basically. We have a VCIO service with that. So what I do is I join that with my maturity model presentation, and I basically go through, I set the table, hey, here's why we're talking. Here's the introduction to our maturity model, what it is. Here's where you're at, level 1 with an arrow pointing where you are, and then go through and, hey, well, what makes up this? So here's the 5 stages. And typically, like if your client's at level 1, there's no point in showing them level 5. It's a lot of information anyway, things like that. So getting it to relating to the client. And then of course, doing your research and things like that, like reading your tables, doing research on the clients, and of course you have a template, but personalizing it a little bit based on who they are. And then asking for feedback and putting things in terms, because if I say like SIEM or EDR, some clients don't know what that is. So being able to explain it. The best one that I had, and I'm really proud of this sale. We had a client who they have EDR on some things, but they still have standard AV on some of the endpoints. And he's like, well, what's the difference between if I have just your semantic AV for cheap versus spending the 20 or whatever on EDR? Obviously, it's not 20, but just a number you throw out there. And they're a retail store, right? So I go, okay, well, here's the difference, right? Your semantic, your antivirus, that's like the pictures you have behind the shelf that say no trespassing. You have a picture of the guy, and hey, this is bad news. If you see him in the store, throw him out. That's what semantic's doing. It's known signatures. So it's comparing the people that are in your store. If they match a no trespassing sign, hey, kick them out. Now let's get EDR in here. You know what that is? That's a bodyguard outside your door. It's scanning IDs before they even get into your place of business. They're looking for anything shady. Those are called 0 days, new things. So if it's something that doesn't look right, doesn't even get into your place. And he's like, oh man, that's really cool. So just being able to kind of make those things in terms that they understand it and connect with those. And that's what I kind of love doing with that. So going through again, the model, the different offerings and things, and being able to explain it in terms that they're able to understand. And then again, kind of like what Tim was saying, is you always have something to look forward to. It's not just, hey, we got you on the client, like we got you taken care of, our help desk has got you covered. And, every 3-4 years or whatever it is, you got your hardware replacement. So you're just really, all you're doing for new business from this client is you're purchasing hardware when it goes out. This gives you constant ways to grow, not only your client's maturity model, but of course, again, revenue with new offerings. Again, level 1, the cybersecurity training. That's something that everyone should have, and it's might not be part of your normal standard stack. So again, another way to increase MRR by getting them on a training service.
Good stuff. I love I love the analogy, right? So that's a new one that and by the way, I'm going to steal that, right? So I love but that's the thing, right? So when I was at the conference yesterday, I had to make the questions relatable to the audience in the room. My challenge was I had high school students, college students, business owners, the mayor, board, and trying to make it relatable in terms that they can understand, right? So you talking to a retail store and talking about the bodyguard, I really love that analogy. I'm going to stick that feather in my cap and pull that out someday. So.
Yeah, it's settled. I think you got to wait tables at least a year before you can work in cybersecurity.
Yep, I agree.
There's a new HR marketing strategy for all those recruiters that are listening. Go find yourself some good restaurant folk.
Start a restaurant called Cyber Bites, and it's part of a pipeline for cybersecurity.
There you go.
It could be, I mean, you can really have like starting off like an MSP, you do hardware repair on the side, and then while their computer's being repaired, make them a sandwich.
Oh man, it's next level.
Yeah.
There you go. I can see some things like some menu items, right? Like so it's the like hacker burger or something like that, right? Or it's the boom of burger or something like that. Yeah. So hey Heather, how are you?
Ram chips.
Yeah, exactly. Heather, thanks for joining. Good to see you here. I'm glad you're here on our live stream. Feel free to, I know you're taking notes as you always do. Nice to have you. Feel free to drop some questions. Tim, do you have anything? Because I'm going to start to get into like the ones and zeros. I'm going to get a little geek speak here.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm going down the ones and zeros path anyway. Like I said, I think the biggest struggle with MSPs is like, how do they bill for the CIS controls that aren't tool based, that are people and processes based, right? Like compliance scorecard goes a long way, right? You're hitting the high notes, hitting the bottleneck in the road really for most of those things, but a lot of those things take a lot of these, like setting up a policy and walking them through like what kind of policy they want. And Josh said, like, got to know the customer. Is this a customer that's like fully remote? Like what's their business? What do they do? Like, what are the risks involved in the business? So like, I think that's where, like I said, you take someone who was only selling hardware, who's an introvert, to all of a sudden becoming restaurant savvy, talking the customer through, what are the, like, tell me about your business. How does it work? And like, and then how do you build for that long conversation and build risk mitigation strategies, right, that are like built into those CIS controls. So I think, like I said, I think that's the long pole in the tent usually, and that's kind of hard to get over. And this is great insight, Josh, like I said, to how they can do that and how they can basically build an offering that they feel like they can execute. So
right.
I feel like that's where you're going, Tim, right? Like with X's and O's.
Yeah. I think I want to kind of talk. So we know, Josh, you have, your MSP, very mature on how you're doing stuff. I think the one or two person MSP can get there themselves as well, right? You heard me mention packaging and pricing and all that kind of stuff, right? And I know Jesse at Power PSA kind of teaches this stuff too, right? And so what I want to talk about is great. I have what's the average, Tim? 47,000 tools an MSP has, or is it 49,000? Or I don't know. MSPs have a crap ton of tools, right? Because we like the shiny objects. But how do I slice and dice my tools into categories for red, yellow, green, or good, better, best, right? And so, Josh, without giving away the tools or your secret sauce or any of that kind of stuff, like what would be in my baseline, lowest, bottom common denominator? I know what I would put. Josh, maybe you could mention one or two things. Tim and Jesse, you could mention one or two things. What should be in that lowest?
Before you get going, and I love where this is going with the stack, and like, as you said, like, how do you build an offering that is effective, reduces risk, and makes you money? So we used to audit, like, the people kind of starting their journey and selling GRC. And I probably shouldn't be saying this but I feel like I haven't been there for a while, but, the average customer was only doing 9 CIS controls, right? So it's like, even the ones that you see on there aren't like layup out of 160 to 175 or whatever it is. So then we could start to like relate that kind of like they really are starting from zero. So like building the stack, building controls, Josh, as I said, how are you doing that? Like, how are you picking those controls and kind of tiering them out, right? It doesn't sound like it's gold, silver, platinum. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah.
So it was a lot of work having to go through each control and kind of the definitions of it. The easiest one I would say is take a look at next gen firewalls, right? There's a specific control that says, are you doing IPS? Are you doing IDS, right? There's 2 sub controls that do that. If you have a next-gen firewall, that takes care of the 2 sub-controls. So really looking into each of the controls and what tool do you have that would be able to meet some or some is better than none, but some or fully meet that actual control. Cybersecurity training, again, that's an easy one. That's I think section 16, I believe. 17 is the dev, but in any case, or maybe it's 15, regardless, there's one that is, do your employees take reoccurring training? And there's different sub-controls. So again, by having a ongoing training platform, phishing simulation, you're meeting a lot of those controls in that category.
So one of the things I like to do, and I'm going to let Jesse chime in as well, right? So we know cyber liability insurance. I'm not going to beat that dead horse, but we know they're asking for 5 or 6 key things. If I were to start my MSP from the ground up right now, I would look at those. Yeah, sure. HIPAA, CMM, like if they're regulated, like that's part of where we want to get them to. But let's start with the insurance, because that's the thing at the end of the day, when boom happens, is going to affect them the most. And you heard me say this before, the revenue and the reputation, right? So I'm going to look at cyber liability insurance. I'm going to start with, do you have backups? Do you have next gen AV? Do you have security awareness training? Right? Are you doing 2FA? Right? There's 5 or 6 key things that every cyber liability, okay, not every, maybe every, I don't know, I'm not insurance, but they're asking, do you do these 5 basic things? We know that's growing and changing, but that's my first offering. I'm offering backup. I'm offering training. I'm offering, maybe some light documentation. I'm offering this base thing to help you build that defensibility towards your cyber liability. It's going to cost you less money. It's going to actually make you better. And then we're going to iterate from there.
Yeah. And I think in addition to that,
I can't hear.
Jesse, you got a little quiet there.
Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's the Novocaine kicking in.
Yeah.
Muting your whole thing. We can hear you. It's just like you're whispering. I don't know.
A little better.
No better? Well,
Jesse and I had at 11 p.m. kind of like three glass tequila about this conversation, like what's in your stack, like, right? I mean, we're kind of going here now anyway. Like, what's your strategy, right? Like, you can pick 12 controls, 20 controls, like what are you doing? And obviously, like, CIS also isn't priority. I mean, it doesn't really make sense when you think about it that like inventory is 1 and 2, but like if you don't know what you own, like you can't protect it. That's kind of like a given, right, Josh? Like you're going to have tools that you should have a general idea of, what you have in inventory. There's a lot of overlap in most of the vendors. They all get to inventory like some go in a roundabout manner, and some kind of go direct to it. But yeah, Tim, like, so zero trust, like, or least trust, however we want to call it, like that would be my general strategy. As an MSP, we won't mention the word Google Suite. And the verticality and the, a lot of the out of the box zero trust. But generally just like a dime shifting left to boom is worth $1 right of boom. Right. So like, how can you invest in protection, right? Vulnerability management, good images, right? CIS Windows configs. What is that like? CIS control 5. You just kind of hit those, like those controls, the CIS like families in the first 1 through 10, like you're going to get a lot of risk buy down. Yeah. So I mean, those are my general thoughts, but.
Yeah, I just had a really great idea from one of our TEAMTIMs, right? Maybe we should break this up into a couple of segments, but like, I think we should help MSPs take the 110 things, group them into categories, and build an offering, right? Yeah. We don't care what tools you put in those offerings, as long as it's Power PSA, Cavello, Compliance Scorecard. We don't care what tools you put in there, but I think that would be a really good exercise for us to do. Like, let's look at the 18 control families, IG1, 2, and 3, and say, these controls, this category of tools.
Yeah.
And I know our good friend Matt Lee's starting to work on something like that as well. But I think that would be a really good exercise for us to do one day.
How am I sounding, by the way? Am I still quiet?
You're good. You're good,
Okay.
Jesse.
I just cranked my volume all the way up, so hopefully it's not peaking now. But no, just to add to that too, and I think you touched on it, is we sometimes we get focused as critical thinkers, technical people is who I'm referring to, where we think deductively rather than inductively, and so we're afraid to color outside the lines. Like we have to do IG1 CIS before we move on to IG2 to IG3. But I think when you look at it, for example, insurance controls, there's some IG3 stuff sprinkled in there. There's IG2, there's IG1. So I would say evaluate in a vacuum. Take a step back, sit down, and say what's going to make my customer the most safe. Course, asset management, right? But also there might be some SDLC things that you need to do, which are part of IG2 or IG3 if they're a development shop. So I think it's not taking such a prescriptive approach, but rather, like you said, almost airdropping in and picking things out of each control and then assigning those to those levels of maturity. So basically, you know your customers the best, and don't be afraid to color outside the lines a little bit as you build out your programs.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
Yeah, Jesse, and that's what I was saying about the risk buy down as well. Like some of the things, you're in a business, like this isn't a CISO, right? Like you don't get your budget matters. So, and your profitability matters. So I think that some of those things that banks have are extremely expensive and I'll never get to deploy them, right? You're not going to get a data lake to like look at all IPs, correlate them and figure out where the anomalies are. And, all these flashy tools, like what are some of the things you can do that are really effective, that are cheap, like YubiKeys or, phishing resistant MFA, right? Like,
YubiKey. I want to pull up Heather's comment here real quick. And so we did a session, actually we did a couple of sessions in the last probably 5 or 6 weeks around having that conversation. So for those of you that see this up here, just go back to our previous feed. We've had a lot of really good discussions with people like Wes Spencer and others on how do we get that seat at the table? How do we overcome that fear of talking to our client, right? How do we get away from talking only to the monitor and actually talking to humans? So look back at some of our previous episodes, do the no, like, subscribe thing, share and all that. No, go back to a couple of the previous episodes, and Heather, you should be able to find the answer to this, right? How do we talk to the client? How do we get away from talking to the computer and speak in terms they understand? So without further ado,
Jesse, we got a panel at IT Nation, kind of, I think.
Yeah, we'll talk about that here as we get towards the end, right? So,
which really talks to that talking to the client, right? So, how do you?
So Josh, without like telling the tools of the secret sauce, I'm gonna kind of pull you over here on full screen real quick. Let's pick on wrong person.
Names close enough.
I'm trying to understand this whole computer thing. I don't know. I've been up since 2:30. All right, so bear with me. All right, Josh. So tell us a little bit about the categories of stuff in your level 1 offering. Right. You don't have to say we use Huntress, we use this, whatever. Like, give us an overall view. If I'm an MSP, I'm starting out, or even I'm, trying to operationalize and mature myself. What would I put in my level 1, package, my red or base, whatever? What would I put in that? What would that look like?
I mean, first and foremost, the easiest one that everyone understands is EDR. You need to have some sort of EDR.
Wait, hold on. For those in the back, EDR, what is EDR? I don't know. I run the restaurant. Dude, EDR, is that something I eat? What is EDR?
Yeah. Endpoint detection and response. I mean, that's kind of...
Is that like antivirus? Oh no! Wait.
Yeah, that's the bodyguard. That's the
You told me exactly. EDR is the bodyguard outside my door. Gotcha.
Yep. Yeah, so it's the next level AV, or so to speak, and really it comes to, you kind of hit the nail on the head, is the cybersecurity insurance requirements. So let's take a look at your cybersecurity insurance requirements, and what do they show? It's going to be kind of the main 5 things. So EDR, as far as an offering, that should be in your stack. MFA is super important, but it's not.
Wait, who's MFA?
in your stack? It just kind of Multi-factor authentication. So something you have and something you know, for example. It's just another step past your password.
Gotcha.
The security awareness training, that's something that pretty much every insurance provider requires now. And there's different, you can check a box, whether it's like once a year, things like that. But every MSP should have some sort of offering with that. And that's another great way to engage with your clients as well, is instead of just saying, hey, yep, we offer this. Now this tool is automatically going to send 5-minute training videos and some simulated phishing. It's another point that gives you to talk with your clients is, hey, 2 months ago, 30% of you guys were clicking these. Now it's down to 10%. So we can see these results, or we can talk with them, or potentially work with some of the more employees that need extra training and things like that. Backups. Everyone, again, needs backups. So it doesn't matter what backup solution you use, but you need to have some sort of offsite backup offering. Patch management. If we want to talk about vulnerabilities,
so you actually put vulnerability management in your baseline package?
No, not to the extent. So without vulnerability management, process is a level 3, and then actually you're scanning and remediating vulnerabilities is level 4. But level 1, I mean, how do you most of the vulnerabilities are because of updates, Windows updates, third-party updates, things like that.
So I might put that into like a patching category.
Yeah, so it's just what I call it is just patch management, and every MSP should have an RMM tool. Pretty sure that's like table stakes being I'm pretty sure if you sort by, if you go to the Reddit or the subreddit MSP, 80% of them are, what RMM are you using? What PSA are you using? And the PSA is an internal tool. So externally, every MSP has an RMM, and I'm pretty sure all RMMs do automatic patching, right? So that should be a kind of a no-brainer. But again, if it's if you're approaching a client who doesn't have an MSP, who just has internal IT, they're probably not using an RMM tool, and they might not be doing patch management. So it's, again, another way, hey, with our base package here, you get patch management. So yeah, patch management. So that's your RMM, your EDR, some sort of security.
Let me make sure I have this right, because I'm going to actually put this out there, right? So EDR, hold on, I'm just going to bring this up right here, right? So EDR, MFA, backup, patch management, and is there a fifth?
The other thing,
training.
Training. Yep. So yeah, backups, EDR, patch management, which is part of your RMM, and then you have to enable MFA, and I mean that's kind of your base level stuff right there. So
Jesse, would you agree? Would you want to add anything to that in that baseline package?
I think that's right. And it's interesting. I just want to point out again that those are not in any sort. They're kind of sprinkled through the CIS controls, right? So I think there's something to be said about that.
So
I mean, really, really what's driving those.
Right? just to make sure, so I have to go back and edit this after the fact. So for the MSPs that are listening, right, the whole idea around here is trying to help you level up, not only be able to sell this stuff, but to better protect your clients, right? And so, as Josh and Jesse sort of pointed out, EDR, MFA, backup, patching, training, right?
I would include incident response plan for the first level, just because that's something we need. Maybe Josh is including it in level 2. Like level 1 is just yeah.
So the level 1 for me is a designated security officer. So that means you choose one person that says, hey, I'm the security officer. Level 3 is the plan, because in level 2, then you're building upon that security officer. So again, building blocks. And it was important for me to have some things considered free wins. So that way, when you're going through this, it's like, hey, all the security sounds awesome, but now we got to spend all this more money. It's like, oh no, we can increase your maturity just a little bit without having to buy anything. So
Love it. I know we're running short on time here, but I'd like to maybe just circle back and get a quick rundown from Josh, how did you make the shift from IT to security? And as you started thinking about this and implementing this, give us just a quick synopsis of kind of how Centrex has done that and kind of your journey through that path, because I know some MSPs are looking to do that still.
So for me personally, I have many years of being like just your general IT, and then doing I was a cloud solutions architect, did sales engineering, things like that. For me on the cyber side, what really did it is, first off, studying for Security Plus certification. I was like, hey, this is pretty cool. This stuff is really interesting. And then I went to a local chamber of commerce, put on just a general cybersecurity conference, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there was a side speaker who talked about how important it is to have that communication, to not be the server admin hiding in the background, and
Mm-hmm.
how it makes for effective cybersecurity leaders. And from the conference on, I was like, man, that's 100% right. I was really enjoying the stories and the people who are defending all the cyber attacks and things like that. And they don't really get to defend against Russian hackers or anything like the ATPs, but it's still really cool. And one of my favorite things is talking to clients and helping them. And so I can take my interest and passion for cybersecurity, my interest and passion for meeting people, and kind of combine that and help make them more secure. So it's really just a culmination of all of my interests and passions and what I get to do. And the one thing I definitely noticed in talking with them and in my personal experiences, we're all focused on the technology. Let's sell you new hardware. Let's do all this cool stuff. But wait a minute, I learned from the restaurants, like, you need to have these procedures in place, and that's not something that a lot of people maybe know or understand. So it kind of gave me a unique talking point in, hey, this is something you might not think of, but it's super important, and it directly relates to cybersecurity. So just kind of being passionate about the unsung heroes of it. And one thing I do when I talk in especially to high schoolers and things like that is, hey, there's cybersecurity is cool. It's the buzzword. It's what everyone wants to go into, but you're not going to be, hoodie up, like programming your firewall or things like that, or malware. It's programming anti-malware and things like that. Like, guess what? It's a lot of reporting. It's a lot of documentation, scanning through logs and things like that. But it can still be, it can still have a fun aspect as long as you have the communication and the understanding of what it is.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Good stuff. So we've got roughly 9 minutes. We're going to take a couple minutes each, kind of give one key takeaway or two key takeaways like we usually do, and then we're going to talk a little bit about what's coming up with TEAMTIM here in the next couple of weeks. So, Tim, you want to go first on what's coming up, or what's one key takeaway? We love to be able to do this kind of thing.
Yeah. So and this is another thing. I've worked with large organizations, right? They have a cybersecurity team and they have a risk team, and this concept of risk is like a lot of the boring stuff that compliance scorecard makes a lot easier, right? Like a lot of the things that are, not fun to deal with, not sexy, like Josh said, but they are critical and they reduce risk dramatically and keep the company safer. So it's crossing that chasm, right? Like getting into this concept of risk, which Jesse's told me this before, like business doesn't care. Like they don't know that word. So it's like kind of a new concept, and speaking that language, you're going to have to use those restaurant skills and get in there and start to figure out like what keeps them up at night, and like then kind of relate that back to policies and procedures that something like compliance scorecard. Wow, I'm pitching you good here, Tim.
I didn't ask for any of this, but big news coming on Tuesday.
Yeah. So, but that I think that's the big takeaway, and I think that Josh has navigated that, and that's what makes Centrex, kind of an elite offering for what you guys do. So that's my key takeaway.
And Jesse, what's a good key takeaway besides don't do these things on a numbed mouth?
Yeah, I do see I'm a little swollen over here now, but yeah, my key takeaways, I have a couple. I would say one, take the CAS controls, yes, use it as a framework, but customize it for your ICP, ideal client profile, and your client base. Don't be afraid to color outside the lines and think in a vacuum. Don't let convention hold you back to say, well, I think this is actually going to be best for our clients, even though it's maybe not the next thing in the continuum. And then from that piece, break it into manageable chunks like Josh and Centrix have done. Gamify it for your clients, relate it to your clients' businesses, speak their language, and continually get your table touches, right, by bringing this up in the QBRs and making it an actionable point and something that's top of mind. So I think those are my takeaways, and I appreciate Josh coming on and sharing those with us today.
And so my key takeaway is quit your cyber job, go work in your local Chili's for a year, and then come back.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
It's accurate.
But I'm not. I am. No, I would say that probably one of the key takeaways is packaging and pricing. You hear it a lot, right? You hear me say start someplace, do something, right? Start with your packaging and pricing. Look at the 47,000 tools you have in your stack. Look at a framework, CIS, whatever. And as Josh did and their team did, like, start here. Start with cyber insurance. Do your EDR, MDR, FDR, ABCD, whatever. Do these 5 or 6 things like we put in chat, right? Number 1, advanced endpoint, the bouncer at the door, EDR. Multi-factor authentication. Make sure you have a passport and a driver's license. Backup, like make sure you're making duplicate copies of stuff, right? Patch management, like make sure you're changing the oil in your car, right? Training, watch some YouTube videos, right? So my key takeaway, start with the simple things and iterate, do your QBRs, thanks lifecycle, and do those and build out good, better, best, right? And that would be my key takeaway. Quit your job, go work at Chili's, and then come back. Josh, what about you? What's a good key takeaway?
I mean, you really nailed it. Yeah, the local Chili's is going to definitely thank us for not having a short staffing problem anymore. But no, it definitely seems like we're all on the same page here. And CS controls are important, and just having a risk management framework, just deciding this is what we're going to base our offerings around, and then building those packages and having those continual upgrades. Always have something on the roadmap. Don't just say, "Hey, we got you, your client. We'll take care of you, and we'll buy you new computers when it's time." Like, you got to do more than that.
Yeah.
Awesome. And so, Tim, why don't you talk a little bit about what's coming up here? We're all pretty excited. I know they didn't put my face or Jesse's face or James' face, but apparently Kyle and Tim rank, but we don't. So come see TEAMTIM live, right?
That's right. I mean, and this wasn't even my text. It was like some abbreviated ML or OpenAI like wrote this from what I originally submitted. But you can kind of interpret it. A lot of it is like, what are metrics or KPIs? They're probably going to vary per client, right? So like using those soft skills to understand what keeps that client up at night. How can the tools, the cybersecurity tools that you deploy, give you numbers that you can leverage to get into like the flywheel effect of questions, as Jesse likes to say, building that kind of like ongoing conversation and trust. So should be a good one. Kyle Christensen, the CEO of Cabello is also joining. And, like I've said this a couple of times, maybe even too much of a broken record, but, when you're looking at vendors in the vendor hall, think about like, how can they answer the customer's tough questions, right? Like, how can they provide something? Or, I think it's great that there's whiz-bang tools that, that do, multiple acronyms of AI. Like, that's great. But like, how do they answer? How do they bring insights? How do they bring capabilities that like you can go back to that you can put into layman's terms, as Tim just did, right? Like with the changing the oil on patching and having backup. So, I think that's generally the panel we're going to go with it. But, and we've done a lot of work on this. Like I've been just kind of drilling people for the last 6 months. Like, hey, what's your favorite KPI? What's your favorite metric? Like, it's probably not tickets resolved. It's probably not MTTR, mean time to resolution, right? It's probably not phishing emails intercepted. It's like probably like dollars in risk. I'll give you a little flavor of like, I think where we're going to go with this.
So this is come see TEAMTIM live on stage at IT Nation November 9th at 3.
I think it is. We just had it pulled up. We got moved.
Yeah,
so
we got our spot moved. Hold on, I'm going to tell you right now. It is
3:30.
3:30. All right, so everybody that's going to IT Nation November 9th, which is I believe the Thursday, right? At 3:30, come over to the main stage. Make sure you heckle Jesse and give Tim some crap, and I'll just keep my mouth shut, right? And our good friend Kyle Christensen, who I'm sure you've seen around LinkedIn, is going to be there, keeping us in line, doing some MC stuff, like putting our feet to the fire as we talk about the KPIs that our clients care about. How many meals have been sitting under the little red light, and how long have they been sitting there? Or is the little red heater lamp even on? Or do I even have extra bulbs for the little, like, oh, you have a backup plan? Do you have an extra bulb? Come hear about how us, and some great minds up on stage, Tim, myself, Jesse, James from Cavello, and Kyle emceeing us. Come hear about what matters, right? Come hear about how we have, as Tim put it, the last 6 months tried to figure out what does the restaurant manager at Chili's care about. So the 9th, IT Nation, 3:30. Come over and hang out with us. We're pretty excited. And so with that, it is 3:01. I will leave with one caveat. I tend to try to not talk about us and myself and what's going on. I know Tim's plugged me a crap today. I appreciate that. Keep an eye on our LinkedIn page. Tuesday the 17th, and my LinkedIn page and our website, and all the news outlets. We're pretty excited. You've seen the compliance scorecard right here on my banner. We're pretty excited about some really amazing news that's coming out next week, right? So yeah, we're trying to do the little pointy thing, right? So I don't really, I do like talking about myself, but not on Team Tim, but we're pretty excited. Yeah.
Friday, we're out.
And it's Friday, we're out.
What it sounds like is I think we need to find a restaurant conference and just come in and without any prior training, hey, we're all a bunch of cybersecurity compliance nerds, and we're going to tell you how to run a better restaurant.
Awesome. All right, everybody, have a great week. We will see you one more time before IT Nation.